Welcome to Musicians versus the World, the podcast where we explore aspects of music and musician life that may not have been covered in music school. I am your host, Christine Smith. Collaboration is the cornerstone of a musician's creativity and career. This is especially true in media composing. Here to talk with me about it today are my guests Ari Posner and Joel Schwartz. They worked together in composing the score to the acclaimed drama series Sullivan's Crossing, whose second season premiered in the US in October 2024 on the CW, and kicks off its third season on Canada's CTV in the spring of 2025. Ari Posner is an award-winning fixture in Canadian film and television, having scored many hit series and award-winning film scores. Through his traditional music background and experience collaborating with live musicians and orchestras, Posner has developed a rich compositional skill set. His studio is currently located at Pirate Sound in downtown Toronto. Joel Schwartz is an ASCAP and SOCAN award-winning composer, guitarist, multi-instrumentalist, and music producer from Canada. With over 20 years of experience, Joel has established himself as both a producer for leading contemporary roots artists and a TV composer, crafting guitar-driven scores. And I'm so excited to chat with both of them. So Joel and Ari, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to Musicians versus the World.
Thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
Indeed, thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with both of you. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and we were mentioning and talking a little bit about how your backgrounds are very different. You're both composers, but Joel, you came from more of a studio musician background, and Ari, you have a more of a traditional musical background. And I was hoping that maybe before we get into Sullivan's Crossing, can we talk a little bit about how you ended up where you are? Joel, we can start with you. How did you go from studio musician and producer to composer?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I wish I knew this answer when I was just starting out, I guess. But I'll share you a bit of my story. So I always wanted to be a musician. I grew up in a really small town in British Columbia in Canada. And I came to Toronto because that's Toronto's like the New York of Canada. That's where things were happening. And I came to attend jazz school, and I studied jazz guitar at school. And fast forward a lot of years, and I feel like what I got to do kind of early in my career is the thing that kind of people dream of doing. I was really lucky, which is playing in bands and touring all over the world.
Right.
And I think that was a little easier like pre-COVID, but that's a different story. So I got to have these incredible experiences. And just talking about the path to music production and composing, I think the thing when I was touring that I really loved the most was, and I started doing more and more, was collaborating with the artists I was working with. That looked like, writing, that looked like arranging music, that looked, the creative conversation was, the deeper creative conversation rather than just say as a hired gun was what interests me. And being part of the creation part and the collaboration part. So that's the path that led me to music production and composing. There's a lot more details in there of like sort of the twists and turns and the eddies and getting this space and all that. But I think it was really being interested in collaboration and the kind of the deeper creative conversation that got me into music production and composing.
Okay. How long was that how long did you tour before you decided to make that switch?
10 or 15 years.
Oh, okay. For
I
a
would
while.
say, and it wasn't like totally a decision. It kind of happened to me, to be honest. Like I was touring with a band called Birds of Chicago, and that was with an artist named Allison Russell, who is now plays with Joni Mitchell. She's award winning, and has a Grammy. She's an incredible artist. And in that particular band is where I felt I had a lot of creative freedom, and I really was able to, I want to say find my voice as an artist, but I really like have a platform where I could really express myself and kind of gain confidence in that voice. And subsequent to that is when I started, I feel like I'd reached some degree of like self-actualization with touring. It was like, okay, I've done it the best level that I'm going to do it. I loved what I'm doing. It's kind of time to do something else. Of course, for many musicians and like myself, COVID was a real turning point. And live touring was no longer an option. I also had a baby on the way, which changes everything.
Sure does.
And so being at home and having a music production business and then composing, it was always in the, like a big, like it was always part of what I'd done, not to the degree that Ari has, but it was always, composing was always part of what I'd done. But it really, I had some opportunities that really opened the doors to doing that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Ari, what about you? Did you always know you wanted to be a composer?
No, I mean, I always played the piano. I mean, not always, but since I was about 6,
Mm-hmm.
and I came from a musical family for sure. But it wasn't until I got to university that I saw a path there that because I did a fine arts degree here in Toronto at York University. And for me, that was like the first time that I was really fully engaged in school, In fact, I did my first year of university back in Winnipeg, where I grew up, and I just was in general arts. And when it came time to choose a major, I didn't really have anything calling me. I didn't know if I wanted to major in psychology or sociology or philosophy. I knew I wasn't going into the sciences, that's for sure. But
Okay.
but the fine arts program at York seemed like a good fit. And when I started it, I really woke up. I was like, wow, this is something that really excites me. I was, excited to get up most mornings and go to class. And I was reasonably competent at it, and also surrounded by like minds. And so that's when I started to think about a path in music. But I really wanted to be a songwriter first. That was my first goal, was
Really?
to not to be a performer, but to just write songs and get artists to cover them. And I did spend quite a few years trying to do that and co-writing with different people, and went to Nashville, and but I just never really got very far at it. It was I couldn't make a living at it, so to speak. And it wasn't until I was introduced to a TV composer in my, I don't know, I guess I was in my early 20s, and someone introduced me to this fellow, and I started working with him just as an intern, and it led to some opportunities to write together, and we even wrote some songs together that was for a kids show. And I realized, like, oh, this is like a fun way to make music, and I can get paid for it, and there's a deadline and everything. It's almost like a real job, right? So yeah, so that's where it started. And then, one thing kind of led to another. After that, I worked with that composer. I was introduced to another fellow named Amin Bhatia, who sort of took me under his wing. And, we started to work on shows together, and things started to move along from there.
Okay. So you went to school for this. So I went to music school in the States, in the US. And what is the training like in Canada? Were you like very specifically into songwriting, or was it a performance degree? What kind of training did you get while you were in school?
Well, I actually, similar to Joel, I was in the jazz program for a couple of years. So I played jazz piano and studied jazz composition, but I also took a stream of performance called contemporary improvisation. And I had this amazing professor named Casey Sokol, who I studied with for a couple of years. And that class was not about any particular kind of music. It was just about learning how to improvise and learning how to take simple ideas, and turn them into more ideas, and build this on top of that. And a lot of it was, I was focused at the piano, but then there was also an ensemble class as well. And we would, literally sit in a classroom together and create music and talk about it and critique each other. And it was just a super mind-opening, wonderful experience there.
Okay. So you had different paths, but it seems like you both were very entrenched and believers in collaboration. Is that a fair thing to say? Yeah.
Totally. And, improvisation is I know that's part of Ari's process too. Like he'll sit at the piano and often with the scene and kind of improvise. And I am the exact same way. Like I would say 90% of the cue is kind of, on Sullivan's Crossing at least, is kind of just me feeling it out, playing guitar, improvising, and then in terms of the collaboration part, I'll ask Ari to play piano or put some strings or, but improvisation is a big connection there too.
Yeah. And that's how you do it as well, Ari?
Yeah, the nature. I mean, I do spend a lot of time, on the piano first. Just sometimes different sounds, sometimes strings, sometimes pads, whatever it is. But just sort of playing along to the scene and seeing what feels right, and you start to learn where the twists and turns are, and you kind of can set up an architecture of the scene that way, and then you can go back and start to fine tune it. But the nature of this world of creating music for the screen the nature of it is very collaborative. Like you really are trying to find a musical solution with the showrunner for the scene, right? And that could mean so many different things. Maybe it's, you're trying to point to a specific plot point, or maybe you're just trying to smooth it out because the acting's not fantastic, or just to help feel an emotion, right? But you got to, like, that whole thing is just, it's a very collaborative process with the person who actually wrote the show or is running the show.
Gotcha. So how did you two end up together for this? Ari, you did the first season, right? But Joel, you came in for the second season. Is that right? How'd you get together?
Well, Joel was playing already all the guitar, most of the guitar parts on the first season. Like I was working with my friend Amin Bhatia on the first season, and neither of us play guitar particularly well. I can dabble a little bit, but we needed a good guitar player for the show. It was clear, and. I can tell you more about how I met Joel, but when season 2 rolled around, Amin just decided that it wasn't really for him, the palette of the show. He was kind of more interested in working on sci-fi and larger sort of sounding scores, which he's terrific at, orchestral stuff, and the sound of Sullivan's is not that. It's very small, it's very intimate, it's very, guitar, piano, a little bit of strings, a little bit of bass. And so he bowed out, and it was pretty obvious to me that Joel should step in because he just already knew the sound of the show, and we had already been collaborating together on some other things, so it was not a big leap for us to start working together on this.
Yeah. Was it any question for you, Joel, that you wanted to step into a composer role, or?
Oh, no, not at all. Like, I mean, Ari and I had, like he said, we've been working together for, how long, Ari? Like, is it around 10 years? Like,
I would say so, yeah.
And most of that chunk was as a session player, and the show Ride, which is a show that kind of connected Ari and I and Amin all on the same show. We all worked on that show. That was a show that had essentially a lot of folk kind of Americana stuff. And that's something I have a deep background in. Like, that's my wheelhouse. Just as Ari has a deep background with piano and strings, and really drawing on each other's strengths on that show, I'd say. And so for Sullivan's, it's acoustic guitar. So, for me, my background as a producer, working with singer-songwriters and building albums and songs, and particularly a lot of kind of simpler songs that really strike a chord, it was a natural fit. And I was very hungry for it, too. I was really excited to get that tap on the shoulder to do the gig with Ari.
Yeah. Well, and I love that the two of you built on each other's strengths And I think that having that simpler score works really well because this is a very dialogue heavy show. And so you really just want to have more of like an undercurrent and helping them, helping the audience feel what the people are feeling. And I just think that when someone is performing or composing on their main instrument, there's like a deep level of understanding and there's a little bit more of an emotional connection. And Joel, just looking, you've got like 15 guitars back there? It's
more.
How many do you have?
None of your business.
So it's very obvious that you live and breathe this guitar. And Ari,
I mean, there's a mandolin. Yeah.
Oh, there's a mandolin too.
They're everywhere. It's almost embarrassing, but they're all tools and they all are different sounds. And I'm not a collector, right? There's some oddball instruments. There's some in rough shape. There's some very fine instruments. They all have a purpose.
Right. Exactly.
Anyways, I'm just justifying my
there's no need to justify.
Expenses.
I have a problem collecting things too. Although you're not collecting, they're all tools. But which guitar did you use for this one, for Sullivan's?
For Sullivan's, there's a primary guitar, acoustic guitar that I use. It's a Martin 018. It's a small body acoustic. That's kind of a parlor type size guitar. I'm using in particular this year. I have a Taylor that's really beautiful, older, kind of 1980s Taylor. I have a really small soprano nylon string guitar. Okay. That's nice for kind of more delicate moments. It's it's a $100 guitar. It's just an example. And I have a Japanese Yamaha nylon that's really nice. That sometimes gets used. But to be honest, a lot of it is on two acoustic guitars and some open tunings and things like that. But a lot of the score can happen on acoustic. Yeah.
Now, how about you, Ari? For the piano, did you use like a digital piano or did you actually record an acoustic piano?
I have an acoustic piano that I play a lot. And I often work out ideas on it, but it wouldn't be very practical to be doing it for this show. Mainly because the sounds of the pianos that I use, and I do use quite a few different sounds, they tend to be quite muted and very sort of soft. Sometimes it's a felt piano sound, where the felt's between you obviously know what that means, but like, it's just that very kind of muted, I don't even know if I have a better way to describe it, but it's like that if you did it with my grand piano upstairs, it wouldn't sound right for the show, I don't think, Yeah. So I have a habit of buying lots of different piano libraries. I'm sure it's a much less expensive habit than Joel's guitar habit, but
we're not talking about that.
Well, the grand piano upstairs is not less expensive.
No, that's true. That's true. But I do like to collect these different piano libraries, and I'll keep quite a few of them in my template so that at any moment I could jump to this one or that one,
Right.
A word might be intimate too. Like a lot of the sounds, like it really feels like they're upright pianos, and it really feels like the soundboard is open and there's the felt is there and the strings are exposed, and it's and really also, intimate sound.
And even just hearing the noise of the piano, like just the mechanical sort of sound of the lever lifting, and you hear the noise of the hammer hitting, or the sound of the dampers lifting up and down. Like there's something about that seems to work well in the show. Whereas there's other times where I might just use a really bright sounding studio piano for in a different context, right? So
wait, so there's an instrument, like there's like a piano sound, a piano library that you can hear the damper pedal? Like you can hear it? Which one is that? Yeah. That's amazing. What is that?
Well, there's lots of them actually.
Really?
I can, I can look up my template here, but there's a wonderful library from a company called Spectrasonics. They make this instrument called Keyscape, and so it has tons of different, not just acoustic pianos, but also electric pianos and various sorts of plucked pianos and mini toy pianos and that kind of stuff. But they have a felt piano that's beautiful, and yeah, you can dial in how much you want to hear the damper noise, how much you want to hear the release of the keys. Like it's very, very deeply sampled, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, someone put a lot of effort into that for sure.
They've come a long way, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And that just creates this amazing, like you said, Joel, intimate sound. So what was your collaboration process? You know, you are both experts in your own area. How did you work together? Were you in the same room? Did you like send things to each other? What did you, so Ari, do you want to take that? Like, how did you work together?
Well, we always start by spotting the show, right? Like that's the first step in scoring a show is, you know, you sit down and watch the whole thing and make decisions about where all the music cues are going to go. And we always do that with Roma Roth, who's the showrunner and creator of the show. And so we have a very collaborative discussion about what's the shopping list here of music, and oh, this is going to be a licensed song over here, so you know the music supervisor is going to find something for that, but over here there's going to be a cue and it's going to start at this time code and it's going to end at this time code, and then you know once we have that list, that master list, we'll go and assign it to who we think's best to do it, right? This is more of a guitar thing, so Joel will take that. And this is more of a piano thing, I'll take that. Oh, this one might be a combination of both, so maybe Ari will start it and then Joel will overdub guitars or vice versa. But we do, once we're working and writing, we're not sitting in the same room. We're both in our separate studios. I do know of composing teams who work together in the same room and take turns sitting at the keyboard or at the mic and, you know, sort of bouncing ideas off each other live like that. I've never really done that too much. I've always sort of done it this way, but we are, as you say, sending things back and forth to each other all the time, right? So I might have a sketch of something and it's not done yet, it's half baked, but I'll put it up on Dropbox so that Joel can hear it, because maybe he's got the next cue and so he knows what I'm doing so that he can come into the next cue in the right key. And all, you know, we'll often send each other tracks to play on as well. Can you put some piano on this, Joel? I might mock out. I just did this the other day. I mocked out a guitar part for him on a harp sound, just because it was like easy to play and felt like I could kind of get the idea across. I would never be able to do it on actual guitar. And then Joel just went and, you know, did his version and replaced it with guitar part and sent it back to me.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know, Joel, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's like, I think one thing Ari and I have spoken about, like, well, there's two thoughts. One is like, I think for the next season, we should try being in the same room and actually, it's like like, you know, we have this whole body of work now, but it might be kind of cool to kind of improvise in the world of Sullivan's Crossing to see what that would be like. So great idea. The second is, you know, I think like Ari and I, we are on different instruments, but we're kind of like after the same thing. And we have this real synchronicity and shorthand. And I think like Ari feels like sometimes he's trying to do stuff on like piano as a guitar player. I know he's told me this before. It's like, think like a guitar player. And similarly on piano, like I'm often doing the same, like with different voicings, like drop two voicings having, you know, a wide, like how a piano would like, you know, root fifth three, like kind of like, or like a wider voicing 3-1-5, for example, those kind of like bigger triads. I'm always doing that. And it's really like, it's more of a piano thing that. And so I think it's when we share cues, it's like we're on the same page. And I think that's such an important part of collaboration too. It's, the communication is there. Ari is incredibly polite and generous, and we have a good just vibe between us. But there's like the X factor, like what people might not know is just there's some real music ESP there too.
Mm.
Did you know that before you started working together? Or
I'll let Ari answer that question because he hired me maybe with a feeling like some of that was there.
Yeah, well, the first time I heard Joel play, it was kind of that exactly what he was saying. Like I went to hear a friend of mine who's a singer doing a concert in Toronto, and Joel happened to be playing with the band at the time, so he was on acoustic guitar, and I was just like. After the show, I was like, I got to meet that guy, right? Because he was just playing parts that I thought that's what I would play. Like that's exactly the notes that I would choose, and
oh, that's amazing.
And I also felt like he was doing sort of keyboardy type voicings on the guitar. It just sounded so full and so interesting to me, but also a beautiful simplicity to it as well. So, and. He what he was saying before about me playing the piano like a guitar, like I've been listening a lot to a pianist named Brad Meldau in recent years, and he's an incredible jazz pianist, maybe the best that we have these days in some ways, but he's talked about that, how he was always inspired to play the piano a bit like the guitar, and he's done a lot of work where he's playing pop songs, and he did a whole album of Beatles songs recently that you can really hear how he's playing these figures in his left hand that have repeated notes that would be like an open string on the guitar, and it just kind of gives everything this lovely little bed to sit against and play his right hand against, so I do find that I'm trying to sound like a guitar sometimes, and I guess Joel's maybe trying to sound like a keyboard sometimes. So it's interesting. You meet in the middle.
Yeah. So you were saying communication, being generous, being polite, and having that X factor makes for great collaboration. What do you find ruins collaboration? Because you both have lots of experience in collaborating with other musicians. What is something that can just ruin a relationship? What do you think, Joel?
Well, I guess like my first response to that would be if trust breaks down for whatever reason, that can be it can be difficult to recover if someone's trust is broken. Mm-hmm. I guess like when I think of this element, I think about music production, and when I'm working with singer-songwriters, like there's this whole part at the beginning, and Ari and I did some of this work together as well, where we really have a lot of conversations about just how we're gonna do this, how we're gonna approach this, really lay out all the expectations. There's no one's like wondering what's gonna happen. Let's get out any obstacles, any hopes, any dreams, like. Ari and I actually went through this process, and I go through this process with singer-songwriters. So if you go through all that, your chances of, something going off the rails is way more minimized, of course. Good. But if something breaks the trust, that's going to be hard to recover from, I think.
What sort of thing would break a trust?
Like with singer-songwriters, like
sure. Yeah.
When I'm producing,
is like being unkind to each other, or going like what sort of thing would ruin?
Well, for sure that. I mean, I've never really experienced. Musicians often there's big emotions, and I have room for that. Like I when it gets into the territory of abuse or something like that, okay, there's boundaries. But like, I understand like people are like, sometimes the fever runs hot. It's like, people really care and passionate about what they're doing. And I get it. And part of Ari and I's job, and we talk about this, is like, how can we lower the blood pressure in the room? Mm-hmm. How can we make sure that everybody, even if there are big feelings, like how do we just like find a creative solution, or just be like, it's going to be okay. We got this.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have a great example, but it's just like I think being like it's the soft skills, right? That are non-musical. It's good communication. It's having emotional self-regulation, being able to have adult conversations, being diplomatic. I learned from like Ari is one of the most seasoned and best composers around. So I learn from him all the time. It's not just, a lot of that is not on the musical. I mean, I do learn from Ari on the musical front, but there's a richer kind of vein that I also learned from Ari on communication, interpersonal skills, how to handle challenging situations, and how to do that gracefully so that everyone's happy.
Yeah, well, Joel, I would say the same about Joel too. I knew he would be a good fit for this show, particularly because of those things he just mentioned. Our showrunner is brilliant and very detailed and a very ambitious woman, and we love working with her, but she can be challenging too sometimes. So it's keeping the blood pressure low is important. And I would say another thing that can ruin collaboration would be ego. I think that's a really important one to check at the door if you can. And I learned that a long time ago. Before really getting into doing scores for TV and film, I spent a lot of time doing advertising music. That's sort of how I cut my teeth. And wow, you really have to put your ego aside for that, because there's so many cooks in the kitchen, and there's a lot of dollars at stake. And you might think that you've written the best 30-second piece that ever existed, but if it's peaking at the time when they're saying the product name, then goodbye to that piece, right? Like you really, it's all about making this product shine in the best possible light, and how do you do that in a way that is a great duet with the voiceover and the picture cuts, and so many times you get told to go back to the drawing table. So that I've learned to not take that stuff personally, for the most part.
Yeah.
It's just music.
It's just music. That's right.
So, Ari, I want to learn from you a little bit. What is your trick for keeping the blood pressure down, for keeping everything calm? Let's hear it.
Lots of alcohol. I said no. I'm just kidding. I do practice. I do practice meditation to a certain extent. My wife does it more, and so she sort of keeps me, keeps a hand in that with me, and I do a lot of exercise. I play a lot of sports, and just try to stay clear-minded, and
Gotcha.
but again, I think it comes from a lot of just the 10,000 hours of being in the studio with clients and learning how to just how to have conversations about things without a lot of emotion, and what is it that you are missing. And sometimes in music it's hard to talk about the notes, because the client won't necessarily be able to talk about the notes, but if you can talk about the emotions that they want to feel, or sometimes you can talk about colors or warmth, or this feels too brittle. You have to find ways to have the dialogue that feels comfortable.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's great. That's excellent. Excellent advice. So going back to the actual music itself, do you have a favorite episode or favorite scene that you think just worked really, really well all around, with the collaboration, the music's awesome, it fits the scene? What would be your favorite? Joel, do you have one?
Well, there is a scene that Ari and I sometimes talk about where we really handed it off to each other, and the result was really nice. It's not a particularly exciting scene, but it is a really critical scene, because these two important characters are having a very difficult and kind of lengthy conversation. Mm-hmm. So the challenge is how to sustain and kind of grow and have the pacing kind of work, but also really respond to the emotions. And we'll try to dig that one up for you.
Yeah, I would love to see that one. Ari, what do you have the same, or is it a different scene for you?
Yeah, I was thinking, I keep coming back to that scene because it takes place in a small little fishing cabin, and even though there is a brewing sort of storm outside, you don't really hear much of that in the scene yet, and it's just it's dark. You got these two main characters that are really talking about deep stuff, and there's nowhere to hide, like for the music to the music needs to be kind of invisible, but it's hard to be invisible in a scene like that. So it's like, how do you just walk that line of helping the emotion along? And it's a good example, that scene of where, I think, Joel, you started it off with some guitar, and then after, you could do the same thing for 2.5 minutes, but it would get boring, right? I think the scene's probably about that long. And so it's not really a show where you do a lot of key changes either. Like it's like, in a song or a movie, or you might make things feel new again by having a key change, but I don't think that would work very well in this show. So it's more about, orchestration and switching instruments. And so then the piano takes over for a little bit, and then maybe it's just some simple string pads, and then the guitar comes back, and maybe things play together a little bit. So we'll try to dig that one up because I think it's a good example.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love to hear that one. Well, Joel and Ari, you guys, it's been so much fun to talk with you. As we finish up, what advice would you give to either aspiring musicians or if you want to talk more particularly about composing, that's fine. But what advice do you have for people that would love to be doing what you're doing? Ari, would you like to start?
You can use this or not, but I always think of Randy Newman's famous quote when he got asked one time, what would you tell young people who want to break into the music business? And he said, why do you want to break into the music business? It's like robbing a bank that's already been robbed. Or he said, it's like, sorry, I got that wrong. It's like breaking into a bank that's already been robbed. But
Right.
That's classic Randy Newman. No, my real advice is, and I used to go and speak at some classes at York when I used to go back there for a business, like a fourth year kind of marketing class. Like, how do you get out there in the world once you've learned all this music and start to like market yourself in the business? And the one thing I used to say to them all the time was that you really have to keep your eyes open 360 degrees and watch for any kind of opportunities that come your way, because you might have your mind on focused here and like, this is what I want to do. But at the beginning of your career, you don't really have a lot of control over where the opportunities are going to come from. And so I think that, you want to get there, but you see something over here and it's like, it's okay, I'm going to take that. And then maybe that'll lead to this. And then maybe that'll lead to that. And eventually it leads you back to where you hope to go in the beginning, or maybe not. Maybe it takes you somewhere else, but that's even better. So I just think it's being flexible in your thinking is really important.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Joel, how about you? What advice do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on this. This could be its own podcast. I think like the music business part, I also taught at Sheridan a music business course for a few years. I think if I was to sum it up, like, okay, a lot of people have the basics together, as in like they're really good at whatever they are doing. They're experts at that, and they have a portfolio. They have these things. I think it's like the next step for a lot of people that I saw as a real obstacle is getting on the phone or getting on Zoom or meeting people in person, and making connections. They don't necessarily have to lead anywhere immediately, but we are in an industry of friends and network, and people want to hire their friends. People want to hire people they know, like, and trust. And so, have coffees with people but, if you don't have work, it's like really about, like, that's what I did, especially during the pandemic when basically all my work was gone. Mm-hmm. I think I had in 2020, and I had a baby on the way, so there was like a real pressure.
Yeah.
I had dozens and dozens, I think nearly 200 Zoom calls with people.
Wow.
And, you really, what Ari's talking about, like checking your ego at the door, like I was, close to 40, and I was like, I kind of had this feeling like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this at this point in my career, like I shouldn't be. But then I really was able to eliminate that stuff, and I learned a lot by talking to a lot of people at that time on Zoom, and I survived. And I thrived, and I think that is an obstacle. Like, networking, making connections. This is how this business runs, right? And it's you're not gonna do yourself or anybody any good if you're just toiling away in front of your computer in your basement and not making connections, and nobody knows about your music.
Yeah. Oh, you guys are great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for chatting with me. So Ari Posner, Joel Schwartz, you two are just wonderful. Can't wait for season 3, and we'll have to see some videos of you two jamming together in the same studio.
Yeah, that's right. I finally have an 88 key keyboard right here. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. So I'm gonna invite you over at some point.
Okay, that's
weighted keys.
Oh, that'll be great. But thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you, Christine. It's great
Thanks so
to
much.
be on.